Good morning all. Today we are going to discuss about the 5th standard 3rd chapter Skeletal System. Okay, so today we are going to deal with the chapter Skeletal System. So in this chapter you will be learned what is skeletal system, which are the parts included in the skeletal system, what are their function, and which are the type of movements of a muscle. Okay, so these and all we will discuss in this chapter. So let's go through the lesson. What is skeletal system? So skeletal system is a framework of bonds which give us support, strength and structure. Okay, that is known as skeletal system. So skeletal system is the system of our body which give us support, strength as well as structure. So these all are provided by a framework of bonds. Okay, so skeletal system is the framework of bonds which help us to support strength, give strength as well as it give us the structure. So that is skeletal system. Adult human being, there are 206 bonds. In an adult human being, there are 206 number of bonds. Okay, 206 number of bonds. So, when we look at outside, the bonds are very strong and tough. Okay, when we look outside, the bonds are very tough as well as hard. Okay, it's very hard and tough, but when we look inside to the bond, it is very soft and spongy. Okay, so this is outside view and this one is inside view. Okay, so when we look outside of a bond, it is very tough as well as hard, but when we look inside of a bond, it is very soft as well as spongy. Okay, so what and all we discussed. What is skeletal system? Skeletal system, it is a framework of bonds. What is skeletal system? It is a framework of bonds. So the bonds from our limbs, bonds from our chest, etc. Okay, so these all together, these all bonds make up the skeletal system of our body. And the functions of the skeletal system, main function of the skeletal system is it support, it gives strength as well as structure or shape to our body. Okay, in an adult human being, there are 206 number of bonds, and when we look outside, it is very hard and tough structure, but when we look inside, it is very soft as well as spongy. Now let us discuss what are the parts of skeletal system. The parts of skeletal system include the skull, backbone, rib cage and 2 pair of limbs. Okay, 2 pair of limbs. So in the case of animals, that is the limbs are hands and legs. That is in the front, that is forelimbs, that is hands, and in the back or in the hind limb, that is legs. Okay, so these limbs are attached to 2 pairs of girdles. So they are attached to the girdles. That is, the forelimbs are attached to the forelimbs are attached to the shoulder girdle. Okay, so 2 type of girdles are there. In that, the forelimb are attached to the girdle that is known as shoulder girdle, and hind limb is attached to the girdle, that is known as hip girdle. Okay, so the limbs are connected to the girdles. So in the forelimbs are connected to the shoulder girdle and hind limb is connected to the hip girdle. Okay. So the limbs are connected to two pairs of girdles, that is shoulder girdle, that is our forelimbs are attached to the shoulder girdle and our hind limbs are attached to the hip girdle. So which are the parts of skeletal system? Skull, backbone, rib cage and two pairs of limbs are the parts of skeletal system. So these parts make up the skeletal system, and these limbs are connected to two pairs of girdles. That is, the forelimbs are connected to the shoulder girdle and the hind limbs are connected to the hip girdle. Okay, so now let us discuss about the functions of skeletal system. The first function, I already told you that the skeletal system give support, then strength and shape to our body. So this will be the first function of skeletal system. And the second function is it helps to protect our internal organs. Okay, it helps to protect our internal organs. Okay, so I told you that from the outside the bones are very tough and hard. So they help us to protect our inside organs. So like our skull. Our skull helps to protect the brain, and our rib cage helps to protect our heart as well as our lungs. Right? And the backbone. Backbone helps to protect our spinal cord. Right. So, the second major function of the skeletal system is to protect our internal organs. The skeletal system helps to protect our internal organs. And the third one is it helps for the movement. It helps for the movement. It helps for the movement. So the muscles are attached to the bones. So this will help for the movement. And the last one is it helps in the formation of blood cell. It helps in the formation of blood cell, that is inside the bone there is a liquid substance that is known as bone marrow. This bone marrow helps to produce the blood cells. Okay. So these are the functions of skeletal system. The support, strength and shape will be provided by the skeletal system, and it helps to protect our internal organ like skull, brain, rib cage, heart and lungs. Then backbone helps to protect the spinal cord. And also another function is it helps for the movement. It helps for the movement. And last one is it helps for the formation of blood cells. So these are the functions of skeletal system. Let's discuss about the parts of skeletal system in detail. Okay, so first we will discuss about the skull. So when we say about the skull, we know that it helps to protect our brain, right? It helps to protect our brain. Protect our brain. So that is the function of this skull. So we know that it's very hard structure. So it will helps to protect our delicate brain. Okay. And when we take an adult human skull, there are 22 number of bones. Okay. How many? 22 number of bones are present in the skull of an adult human being. Okay. And in the 22 number of bones, 8 number of bones are cranial bones, and 14 number of bones are facial bones. Okay, so in an adult human being, there are 22 number of bonds. In that, 8 flat bonds are known as cranial bonds. This is known as cranial bonds, and 14 number of bonds, that is facial bonds. There are 14 number of bonds, that is facial bonds. Okay, so the upper portion, this is the upper portion of the skull. Upper portion of the skull. Upper portion of the skull is known as the bones which are present in the upper portion of skull. They are known as cranial bones. They are 8 in numbers, and facial bonds, which creates the bonds in the face as well as in the jaw. Okay. So lower portion, the lower portion of the skull contain the face and jaw. So this together make up the facial bones, and these facial bones are 14 in number. Okay. And another important factor of the skull are all the bones in the skull are not able to move except the lower jaw, bones in the lower jaw. So this helps them, or this will help us to eat as well as to speak. Okay, so the movement shallow, this our bones in our skull, this lower jaw only moves, so that's why we are able to eat as well as speak. Okay. All bones in the skull are fixed. All bones in the skull are fixed except the lower jaw, because it is movable. That's why we are able to eat the food as well as we are able to speak. Okay. Second part of the skeletal system is our backbone. Second part is our backbone, and the skull is attached to the backbone. Okay, the skull is attached to the backbone. So first you need to remember that skull is attached to the backbone. Skull is attached to the backbone, and there are 33 number of small bones present in our backbone. Okay, our backbone is made up of 33 number of small bones, and the small bones are called vertebrae, and the small bones are called vertebrae. Don't forget the backbone is made of 33 number of bones, 33 number of small bones, and they are known as vertebrae. And these vertebrae are joined together one above the other to form a strong column that is known as vertebral or spinal column. Okay, so there are 33 number of bones, small bones present in our backbone. They are known as vertebrae, and they are joined together one above the other, forming a strong column that is known as vertebral or spinal column. And what would be the function of this backbone? We know that they are very flexible, as well as it helps to protect our spinal cord. We know that it is very delicate. Our spinal cord is very delicate. So to protect that spinal cord, this vertebral column helps. Okay, so vertebral column helps to protect spinal cord, and it is flexible. The vertebrae are flexible, so it allows a slight movement, or the backward and forward and backward movement of a vertebral cord or the backbone is done because the vertebrae are flexible. Okay, and also it helps to protect our delicate spinal cord. So these are the function of backbone and structure of backbone. Okay, so the skull is attached to the backbone and there are 33 number of small bones present in the backbone, and the small bones are called vertebrae, and these vertebrae are flexible and these vertebrae are joined together one above the other. Okay, one above the other, forming a strong column that is known as vertebral or spinal column, and it helps to protect our delicate spinal cord, and also it helps for the backward and forward movement of our backbone. So the vertebrae allow as the backward and forward movement of our backbone. Okay, and also in the vertebrae, in the center there is a hole which allow the passage of the spinal cord. Okay, so the spinal cord pass through that holes present in the vertebrae. Okay, discuss the third part in the skeletal system, that is rib cage. So when we say about the rib cage, the bones in the rib cage are flat, thin and curved. They are flat, thin and curved structured bones. Okay, so this is called a rib cage because these bones make a cage-like structure. These bones, this flat, thin and curved structure of bones make a structure called a cage-like structure, and it is called a rib cage. Okay, and the function of the rib cage is to protect as I told you earlier that it protect our lungs and heart. Protect lungs and heart. And there are 12 pairs of ribs in the rib cage. Okay, how many? 12 pairs. 12 pairs of ribs present in the rib cage. 12 pairs of ribs are present in the rib cage, and these ribs are connected to a long bone in the chest, that is 12 pairs of ribs. Okay, 12 pairs of ribs. 12 pairs of ribs are present in the rib cage. 12 pairs of ribs are present in the rib cage, and the ribs are connected to a long bone in the rib cage that is known as sternum. That is known as sternum. Okay, so what is sternum? The ribs in the front are connected to a long bone in the rib cage, and that is known as the sternum. Okay, so front ribs are connected, or the front ribs holds by this sternum. Okay, which is a long bone present in the rib cage. Okay, which is present at the center of the rib cage. And these ribs are also connected to the backbone. Okay, these ribs are also connected to the backbone, and there are one pair of ribs which are not connected to the sternum but only connected to the backbone, and they are known as the floating ribs. They are known as the floating ribs. Okay, so don't forget about this. So rib cage, the name rib cage came because the flat, thin, curved bones make a cage-like structure. That's why it is called a rib cage. There are 12 pairs of ribs in the rib cage, which helps to protect the lungs and heart. and there is a long bone in the center of the rib cage which helps to hold the front ribs, and also the ribs attached to the backbone, and there are one pair of ribs which is not connected to the sternum but to the backbone, and they are known as the floating ribs. Okay, discuss about the fourth part of the skeletal system, that is the limbs. Okay, so we know that limbs are upper limbs and the lower limbs. Upper limbs and the lower limbs, right? So upper limbs, that is arm, and lower limbs, that is leg, right? Upper limbs are arm and lower limbs are leg. So when we say about the upper limb, the upper arm has a long bone that is known as humerus. Okay, that bone named humerus. And in the lower arm, you can see two small bones. They are known as ulna and radius. So radius and ulna are the small bones present in the lower arm, and in the upper arm you can see a long bone that is known as humerus. In the case of lower limbs, the upper bones in the leg is known as femur or thigh bone. Femur or thigh bone. It is the largest bone in our body. Okay, femur is the largest bone in our skeletal system. Femur is the largest bone in our skeletal system. And lower bones in the legs consist the tibia and fibula. Tibia and fibula. There are two bones present in the legs. Lower bones in the legs are known as tibia and fibula. Okay. So here the upper limb is connected to a girdle that I already told you, that shoulder girdle or pectoral girdle, whereas the lower limb connected to the girdle, that is known as hip or pelvic girdle. Hip or pelvic girdle. And when we say about the number of bones present in the upper and lower limbs, here 8 number of bones in the wrist, 5 number of bones in the palm, and 14 numbers present in the fingers. In the case of lower limbs, 5 number of bones are present in the ankle, and 5 number of bones are present in the feet. 14 number of bones are present in the toes. Okay. So these are the bones distribution in the upper and lower limbs. Okay, so this is all about the skeletal system. So what and all we discussed, skeletal system is the framework of bones which provide the shape, structure and strength to our body, as well as the functions of skeletal system. We discussed that. First one is support, strength, and it gives support, it gives strength, and it gives shape to our body. Then secondly we discuss it produce blood cells. Okay, and then we discuss it helps for the movement, where the muscles are attached to the bones, so that will help for the movement. And we discuss that it helps to protect the internal organs, and we discuss different parts of skeletal system, that is skull, backbone, rib cage, and limbs. So now in the next class we will discuss about the different joints. Okay.